Hello, my friend, and welcome. This is your moment. I'm Katarina Miletic, and you are listening to the podcast that will challenge you to think with your soul and believe that your only power is inside you. Today, I have a huge honor to introduce Pat Quinn, one of the world's most skillful speakers of our time, and he has coached some of the best speakers in the world. In essence, whether you intend to speak in front of an audience at some point in the future, whether you have never presented anything before, whether you have given a few presentations and you don't have a feeling that they went really well, or whether you're a seasoned speaker who has traveled the world, this interview is going to elevate you to the next level and help you raise your storytelling with clear steps so you can start applying them right away. Pat Quinn is teaching business owners just like us how to tell their story and share their message effectively. This is an episode you simply cannot afford to miss. Hi, Pat.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
A very warm welcome to This Is Your Moment podcast. It's so great to see you and such a privilege to have you here.
Oh, it's my honor to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
So have I. Life convinced me of its magic many years ago. And how this interview came to be, it's an incredible story in itself. The first time I heard you speak was at a World Summit event back in October 2020. This was organized by, of course, Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi. Your story started by us joining you in the cornfield. And by the time you finished your presentation, there was not a dry eye in the entire virtual auditorium. I didn't see any other speaker hold attention quite like you did. I'm interested to know what makes you passionate about storytelling.
Well, it's a great question, and I appreciate what you said about my World Summit appearance. There were so many great speakers at that event, and I was honored to be a part of them. You know, I'm passionate about storytelling because I believe every person has a story that needs to be told. I believe every person has things that has happened to them for a reason, and that one of your purposes in life is to tell others that story. I think sometimes, we get caught up in other people's big stories. We have what I call story envy, where we listen to other people's stories and like, that's amazing. And we listen to this person's story and that's amazing. And then we look at our story and we think, well, that's just ordinary. But here's what I know. I know that your story was given to you for a reason, that there's another person out in the world today who's struggling with something, and your story is exactly what they need. I coach Katarina. I coach someone who's climbed to the top of Mount Everest. I coach 2 different astronauts who have been in space. And when they tell their stories, how many other people in the audience can relate to that? And the answer is not many. Very few people have climbed to the top of Mount Everest or been in space.
Right.
But when somebody tells a story about struggling with depression, when somebody tells a story about arguing with their spouse, when somebody tells a story about their kids and how they worry about their kids, how many other people can relate to that? And the answer is millions. I think we should stop judging storytelling based on how many people come up to you afterwards and say, that was an amazing story. And we should start judging storytelling based on how many people come up to you afterwards and say, that same thing happened to me. Because those are the most valuable stories. Those are the stories that create connection. Those are the stories that offer hope. And those are the stories that offer real solution. And if you own a business, those are the stories that will help grow your business attract new clients and bring new revenue and new impact into your world.
For sure. Like when you put it that way, it makes so much sense. For as business owners, as brand owners, it is personal to us, and we want to make that real connection with people. And having a story that actually relates to them is much more valuable than having this extraordinary story.
So much more.
What are the key ingredients when it comes to capturing the imagination of people in the room? I'm curious about whether this is more a matter of a talent or a skill, or are both necessary to capture the essence of the message that we want to convey.
Well, I believe it is a skill that can be learned, a skill that can be practiced, and a skill that can be finely tuned. The ability to tell your story. And so I don't think there's any natural gift. I'm an introvert. I'm very shy. And other people I know are extroverts, and they just love to talk. But sometimes when someone's an extrovert, their story is way too long and way too boastful and not really. And sometimes when somebody's an introvert, they think, I can't do this. But here's what I know. There are other introverts out there just waiting for you to step up and find your voice so that they can see themselves on stage, so that they can see themselves. And everything I talk about today, Katerina, works not only when you have the opportunity to speak to a group of people, but works in one-on-one conversation, works on the phone, works on Zoom, works across the table from Starbucks. Some of us will get an opportunity to stand up and speak in front of 10 people or 100 people or maybe 300 people. But most of the communication that I help people with is speaking to 2 or 3 people on a Zoom call, speaking to one person on the phone, speaking across your desk or across the table from someone. And the same thing is true. You have to start by connecting. You have to start connecting with a story. And so what makes a story really connect, what makes a story one that is going to move the person who you're speaking to not only connect with you, but want to do business with you, is that it has to be personal. You shouldn't be telling someone else's story. Tell part of your story. It has to be visual. You should not just talk in theory and say, I was sad, or talk in theory and say, I was struggling. You should paint a picture for us so the person you're speaking to can picture it. You can say, I was sad and I was slouched over in my chair and I leaned over against the table. And somebody can picture that scene. Or I was struggling to get my kids to behave, and I was holding them by their hands as they tried to pull away from me, and I pulled them back and they screamed. Now you can picture that scene. It's totally different than just saying I'm sad or I was struggling. You paint a visual picture. And so first you want it to be a personal story. Second, you want it to be a visual story. And then third, you want it to be a simple story. The stories that connect are not 24 chapters long with ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. The stories that connect are very simple story. Things were good and then they turned bad, or things were bad and then they turned good. These are very simple stories, but those are the types of stories that are the most universal, the most connecting. And those are the types of stories that are going to get people to say, I want to do business with you. Those are the types of stories that we love. Personal, visual, and simple.
Indeed. And it's an essential skill for any business owner to learn, isn't it? Because connecting with people, once again, it's primary for to do any kind of business. It starts with that connection. Am I correct in understanding, Pat, that the purpose of our story is to emotionally bond with our audience at the beginning of the presentation? You talk about speaker having to be the right amount of ordinary and the right amount of extraordinary, and then be willing to share their story. Can you please tell us more about how to achieve this balance?
Yeah, I think this is the most important skill that any business owner can have, is the ability to tell their story. I think it's a skill that you use every single day. And I think when implemented correctly, telling your story is the greatest marketing tool that you have. It's free to do. The return on investment is huge. And if you tell your story every day, if you keep track of only one metric in this year, keep track of how many times you tell your story this year. Your goal in a week of 7 days should be to tell your story 7 times. Every day you tell a new person your story, and it will become the greatest marketing tool that your business have. It will become the way that you attract new clients, get new business, attract new revenue, and have the impact on the world that you know you can be having, that you know you should be having, all by telling your story. And so one of the keys to telling that story so that you are ordinary, extraordinary, and show your why. Ordinary means I'm just like you. I've walked in your shoes. I've thought the things that you're thinking right now. Extraordinary simply means I've solved one problem that you still have. So if you're still struggling to do something, I have a solution to that problem. I don't have to solve all your problems. Nobody can solve all your problems, but I can solve one problem that you still have right now. And show your why simply means that this is about more than getting another customer. This is about more than me just making money. There's a reason I do this. There's a reason this is a passion for me. There's a reason this is a mission for me that I am on. This is more than a business. This is my mission. And I believe the fastest and easiest way to do that is through episodic storytelling. Episodic storytelling is not to read us your resume. And we've all heard people who, the moment we get a chance for them to speak, they start telling us about their last 3 jobs. Mm-hmm. Episodic storytelling is not to tell us your entire life story. If your story begins with, I was born at a very young age, you're doing it wrong. And by the way, despite what some other people are out there coaching you and telling you, episodic storytelling is not necessarily to share with us the most painful moment of your life. There's a saying, criers are not buyers. Your purpose is not to get the audience to cry. Yeah. Sometimes your purpose is to get the audience to feel something, but that could easily be joy or laughter or excitement. And you certainly want to connect with your audience, but a lot of times it's not appropriate in your opening story, your first opportunity to speak to somebody who you just met, to share the most painful moment of your life. So what is episodic storytelling? Episodic storytelling is to take us into a room. To take us into a room where we can see what you're seeing, hear what you're hearing, feel what you're feeling. So instead of telling us that your life got really bad and at one point you broke and had to change your direction, why don't you take us into the room where that happened? Was that at the kitchen table where one night after the kids went to bed, you just put your head in your hands and you cried? Or were you driving down the street and it just came over you like a wave and you had to pull over to the side of the road and pound on the steering wheel and scream at the top? Take us into the room and let us see what you see. Let us hear what you hear. Let us feel what you feel. One of the artists that I work with is Adrienne, and Adrienne tells a story about how she used to say, I grew up and I struggled after I got married. We had 2 kids and I really struggled financially. We changed her opening story. And now she tells about the day that she had to actually sell her kids' toys in a yard sale. And she talks about having the Fisher-Price kitchen, which is iconic if you're a parent, that giant plastic kitchen. And she had it in the front yard with a price tag on it. And a guy in a pickup truck drove up and said, I want the kitchen. And she helped him put it in the back of her pickup truck. And as she was putting it in the back of the pickup truck, she looked back to the house and she could hear her 2 kids crying in the front window as they watched their favorite toy get sold so that she could pay the mortgage. I mean, that visual image and that sound of those kids screaming is seared into the memory of anyone who has heard Adrienne tell this story. Mm-hmm. And now you know why she does what she does. Now you know why she helps people the way she helps people. Because it's her mission in life, not only to support for her family, but to help other people so that they don't need to have moments like that. And it just really creates this bond with the audience. Now her story is their story. And they just don't want to listen to her. They want to do business with her. It's a great example of episodic storytelling. So my question for everybody watching this is, what room can you take us into? What room can you take us into where we can see what you see, hear what you hear, feel what you feel? And if you tell that to one person, a small group of people, or a large audience, whoever is listening is going to become emotionally attached to your story. And not just want to listen to the rest of what you have to say today, but want to be involved in that story in the future. And most importantly, they will want to do business with you.
Wow. That is really truly so powerful, and you're right, there is so much wrong advice there. People do tend to say, talk about the struggles that you have overcome, but if you take people in a interesting way like this and pull on their heartstrings, like I could feel, as you were telling Adrian's story, I could feel what she was feeling, even though I have not been in a similar position, but I could feel it. Now, I know that storytelling isn't just words. How important is our presentation style, like body language and everything else that we do not communicate just with words?
Great question. What all great storytellers do is create contrasts. Contrasts between how things are in the beginning of the story and how things are in the end of the story. Contrasts between what would be like to work with me and what it will be like to not work with me. All great storytellers create contrasts. Well, how do you create a contrast? Let me give you 3 or 4 things that you can think about. One of the ways that you can create a contrast is with the pace of your voice. And so when the story is not going well, when the story is going down, as we say, we always think about the emotional line of your story. Is the emotional line of your story going up, or is the emotional line of your story going down? When the emotional line of your story is going down, when you're crying at the kitchen table, when you're looking at the bills and can't figure out how to pay them, when you're selling your kids toys in the front yard, your pace should go down. Slow down your pace. When the story turns up, when you figure out a solution to the problem, when you discover your passion in life, when things start to go right for you and you start to have the impact that you know that you should and could be having in this world, your pace should go up. When the emotional line goes up, your pace goes up. So the pace of your speaking is one of your biggest tools. Second tool that you have is your volume. When the emotional line of the story is going down, your volume should go down. That has a couple of effects. It lets people know that the emotional line is going down. It also causes a need for people to lean into you, both on stage and online, on the phone and across the table at a coffee house. When you drop your volume a little bit, you just watch the other person lean into you, and they'll get more connected to your story. Now, once the story turns and things start to get better, once you realize your passion and you start to help other people and they start to see results, so they tell their friends and then they start to get results, and you're having the impact on this world that you should be having, then your pace should pick up, but your volume should go up as well. When the emotional line goes down, volume goes down, pace goes down. When the emotional line goes up, volume goes up, pace goes up. And then you have the tone of your voice at the end of sentences. At the end of sentences, the tone of your voice can turn down. Or at the end of sentences, the tone of your voice can turn up, and you get to choose. If the emotional line's going down, the tone of your voice at the end of sentences should turn down because things aren't going well. But when things do start to go well, the tone of your voice can turn up at the end of every sentence. And it's really like this, Katerina, like if you were speaking a different language, if you were speaking like how Charlie Brown's teacher speaks, like wah, 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 even if you don't understand a word the speaker's saying, you should be able to tell how the story's going. Wah, 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 wah. Or wah, 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 wah. Like you should be able to tell that. And what that does is it makes the audience completely come along for the ride. There's times when we're listening to people and we kind of lose the story. There's times when we're listening to people and we're like, oh my gosh, I hope there's not going to be a quiz. I just missed a whole bunch of what you were saying because I was thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner later. When everything matches the emotional line, when your pace, when your volume, when your tone of voice matches the emotional line, you can't help but follow the story. And you're interested in the story because when all that's going down, you're feeling it. Yeah. You're physically feeling like, wow, this story's weighting me down. And then when the story starts to pick up, you're like, wow, I want to go on this joyride with you. And it's because the speaker is making it so easy for me to follow along, and they're emotionally involving me in the entire story with their voice, with their pace, with their volume, with their tone. And so your words are one half of it, but the things that you do with your other tools that create that emotional line are the other half of storytelling that's going to make a huge difference for you every single time you tell your story.
Wow. I mean, you took us on a journey just now in your answer. I could feel that you're demonstrating everything with your voice as you were saying what we should do. The problem is it's slightly counterintuitive, isn't it, to slow the pace down. And because when we're in these difficult moments, probably we feel our heart racing, and and we want to tell a story in a different way, which isn't how we should do it. I'm learning. Pat, you have been quoted saying the two biggest mistakes that speakers make are too many slides and teaching too much. It is often tempting to tell our entire life story, as you said at the beginning, and to throw into a presentation way too much information. This has the opposite effect of taking the audience on a journey with us, and that is our aim. Is there a best framework for this that you recommend?
Well, I do think this is one of the biggest mistakes that business owners make as they're talking to somebody who they would like to have become a customer one day. And they try to teach too much. The person who teaches the most does not win. The person who teaches the most leaves the person they're speaking to overwhelmed and confused. And overwhelmed and confused people don't make buying decisions. It's simply, they're just overwhelmed. And when we're overwhelmed and confused, we don't say yes. We say not now. We say maybe. And so if you're out there and you're here, you're talking to a lot of people, you're even giving proposals, and you're asking for the sale, or you're asking people to become a client, and they say, I want to, just not right now, or I love your stuff, I'll have to think about it. Right. Or maybe give me a little time, and then a little time goes by and you're still not, like, if you're getting a lot of maybes and a little yes, but not nows, you're overwhelming them with information. You're just giving them too much. It's the clearest signal of all. So here's what I like to think about. I never like to start with what I want to teach the audience. I never like to start with, what am I going to say today? What I always start with, and you know this because I asked you this question just a few minutes ago, Katerina, how much time do I have? It's the first question I ask because it determines everything else. If you tell me I have 10 minutes, like if we're getting on the phone call and it's going to be a 10-minute phone call, I will teach you completely different things than if you tell me we have an hour. And I think the mistake a lot of people make is they think every time out, they need to teach everything they know. I'm not trying to teach you everything I know about speaking right now. That would just scare you. Let me tell you what it wouldn't do. It wouldn't help you. What would help you is if I teach the right amount for the amount of time that we have together. Right. And what that does is it leaves you feeling helped, not scared. Right. It leaves you feeling capable, not overwhelmed. It leaves you feeling equipped, not confused. And a person who feels helped, capable, and equipped is ready to buy, is ready to say yes, is ready to hand over their credit card, is ready to sign on the dotted line. Whatever you want them to do next, they're ready. And so I think people think about it the wrong way. Most people think, how do I teach them everything I know, or how can I teach them the most possible? My question is always, how much time do I have? That's where I always start. How much time do we have? And then I ask, how can I help you the most in that much time? What 1, 2, or 3 things can I teach you to help you the most in that much time? That approach, starting with time and then asking, how can I help the most in that much time, gets me teaching the right amount, not too much, which leaves the person I'm speaking to ready to say yes, not ready to say, I'll have to think about it and I'll get back to you.
Yes. Quite. When we are overwhelmed, we would not jump in. We would just pull back and say, I can't commit to this right now, because that feeling of overwhelm, just you start doubting, am I capable of doing this? Even if you want to. But when you do give a right measure, person does feel capable. They feel like invited to learn more, and they feel well informed to know that they can indeed achieve this.
Exactly.
Excellent points. Thank you so much for that. You've already mentioned a bit, but I want to dig a little bit deeper here. Does practice make perfect? I mean, obviously, I am aware, and we all know the answer to this question, but I would really appreciate the benefit of your wisdom and experience when it comes to becoming a more compelling speaker.
Well, here's why I believe everyone should be telling their story every single day. Because the first time you do it won't be the best time that you do it.
Mm.
And if you wait until you're ready, if you wait until it's perfect, you'll never do it. You will never be ready, and it will never be perfect. So just go do it. And tomorrow, do it again. And the next day, do it again. And it'll be ugly, and it'll be fumbly, and it'll be bumbly. But a week from now, you'll look back and be like, wow, I'm actually getting better at this. One of my core mantras, Katarina, is low stakes practice before high stakes opportunities. I believe one day everybody watching this is going to get an opportunity. I remember the first time I met Tony Robbins. I was standing in his studio in Miami, and he walked in. I'd never met him before, and he just filled the doorway. Like the sun got covered up as he filled the doorway. And I'm a big guy. I'm like 6 feet, 6 inches tall. And he walks in, and he's just like this tower of a man, and he holds out his big hand, and I have a big hand, but he shakes my hand, and he just catches me, and I got this tiny little baby hand in his giant hand. And then he looks at me and he says, I don't know your story. Tell me about you. And I have to tell you, that next 2 minutes, you better have a story, and it better not be the first time you're telling it.
Yes.
If you know that one day you're going to have an opportunity in front of your ideal client, in front of your ideal audience, in front of an influencer whose thumbs up or thumbs down could make or break your business, or whose friends could open door after door for you, I hope that's not, when you meet them that day, I hope it's not the first time that you're telling your story. So low stakes practice before high stakes opportunity. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to speak in front of 1,800 people who are dream clients for me, all business owners who can want to grow their business and who do a lot of speaking. And I was going to sell something there, so there's a lot of revenue online. I tell you, I was a little bit nervous, but I'll tell you this also. It was not the first time I told that story. See, the 3 weeks prior to that, I'd set up a whole bunch of little opportunities. I'd spoken at a local library to just a group of moms who wondered what I was talking about. I'd gathered all the neighbor kids in my garage and gave them $5 so they could listen to me tell my story. I'd gone to another community group of volunteers and told my story to them. And every time it got a little bit better. It got a little bit smoother. I fumbled around a little bit less. So when I did get that big opportunity in front of Tony Robbins, in front of 1,800 people who are ideal clients, it wasn't the first time that I'd done it. And so, and social media gives us an opportunity to go on Facebook Live this afternoon and tell our story. Yes. And it won't be perfect. And maybe only 3 people will watch, but that's good the first time because it won't be very good. And tomorrow, maybe 6 people will watch, and that's good the second time because it won't be that good. But a year from now, if you keep doing this, you're going to get really good at telling this story, and that audience is going to continue to grow. And this is going to be the greatest marketing tool that you have once you get good at it.
Yes. Inspiring, truly. And that's exactly what the journey I set on. Last February, I started this podcast. And I was scared, but I was determined to do it. And this evening, I have Pat Quinn on my podcast. It's just, it proves your point beautifully. And it does get easier. It still isn't perfect, but it did get me to interview you because I was practicing throughout this last year. I was getting getting out there and having a voice and just sharing the story as well. Now, this is your moment, audience, and I would love to learn more about StoryLinq. The invitation to join will be, of course, in description. When did this idea first come to you, and how long did it take to create? That's just something that I'm curious about. And of course, how exactly does StoryLinq help business owners to make better presentations?
Well, for years, I gathered my stories on Post-it notes and cocktail napkins. You know, I'd be someplace and something would happen, or I'd be someplace and I'd think, I could tell that story. So I jotted down on whatever scrap of paper was nearby, and I kept them in a folder. And I was, look, scraps would fall off, and I'd run back and get them, and they were all over the place. Then someone gave me a story journal, one place where I could store all of my stories, and I filled it with a lot of stories. But it wasn't always with me. Sometimes I'd be out to eat somewhere and something would happen and I wouldn't have my story journal, so I'd write it on a napkin. Sometimes I'd be in the car and something would happen, so I'd jot it on the back of a receipt or on a little scrap of paper. So my story journal got filled with all these scraps of papers and Post-it notes and napkins. I was one strong wind away, one gust of wind away from losing all of my stories. So when the global pandemic hit and I had some free time where nobody was leaving their house, my programmer was here with me, we got together and said, let's solve this. Let's create a place where you can store all of your stories. We looked around for one and we couldn't find one, so we made one. StoryLinq is one place in the cloud where you can store all of your stories. It's always with you, because you can access it from your phone, from your computer, from your laptop, from your tablet. It's always with you. StoryLinq gives you a place to store your stories in the cloud forever, and it gives you a chance to organize them. You can store them by type of story. These are the funny stories. These are the opening stories. These stories teach content. These stories are closing stories. You store them with a title, and they're all stored forever at StoryLinq.com. Then, anytime you need to give a presentation, whether that's a one-on-one sales call, whether it's in front of a possible client, whether you're speaking to a group, all you do is go to StoryLinq.com and choose from your menu of saved stories which stories you want to tell and what order you want to tell them in. Push one button and your entire script for that presentation prints out. It takes the process of writing a presentation from days down to minutes. And as you're putting in each of your stories, there's video teaching from me, giving you tips and strategies on how to tell that story the very best way. And so StoryLinq.com, StoryLinq.com is the one place to store and organize all of your stories and to put your presentations together quickly with the push of one button. And so I would love to offer everybody who listens to this podcast a free 30-day trial, so you can check out StoryLinq.com, view the training from me, enter your stories, see if it works for you, and see if it's a tool that you would actually use. And you can get 30 days free at StoryLinq.com, StoryLinq.com, by entering the discount code Katarina when you register. And they just have to use your first name and they would be able to get 30 days for free. Check it out and see if it's the right tool for you. If it's the right tool for you, you can keep using it. If it's not, you can cancel in those first 30 days and it's not the right tool for you. But I think everybody has a story to tell. I think oftentimes those stories get lost because we forget them or we're busy, something else happens. I think when we sit down, we can remember some of our stories, but we also miss some of our best stories. And I just want you to have one place where we can capture and organize all of your stories, because when you tell your story, other people learn that they are not alone. When you tell your story, other people learn that there are real solutions. And when you tell your story, other people know that there is hope. So I just want to encourage everybody to capture those stories someplace and tell those stories every single day.
Sounds fascinating. And I know that you have currently a competition. Is it called Story Ball, I believe?
We are currently holding our Story Ball, which is a competition. Every month there's free trainings at StoryLinq.com. There's an active community of speakers who help each other find stages and help each other with their talks. This month we're holding a little competition just for people who are at StoryLinq.com for our members. And there's a chance to watch other people's presentations and vote on them. So we have a lot of fun as a community. And at the same time, we've got a great online tool, a place to store all of our stories.
Absolutely fascinating. And to me, it comes at a personal time in my life when, unfortunately, on 14th of December, my dad passed away. And the story that wants to come through is how I became an artist. And I actually shared that story for the first time publicly on the day that you announced this competition. And I have got it down to 5 minutes, Pat, but I don't quite qualify yet. So I'm practicing, and I hope by the end of the weekend that I will be able to enter the competition, because it just like the coincidence of the timing was too much for me to think that it is a coincidence. But I would recommend everyone try, as you said, and you're giving us so generously 30 days free trial, that I think we ought to try for ourselves, the StoryLinq.com, and see how many good stories we have inside us that can inspire and help other people. And Pat, what you probably don't know is a bit of a tradition for me to ask my guest a little bit out there question for the end of the podcast. Here comes yours. There is an undeniable presence of pure magic in your presentations. And knowing your level of honesty, it is with genuine curiosity that I ask this. Has your life inspired your magic? Or has being a magician opened the doors to your artful stage presence and influence?
Oh, great question. And I love the fact that you asked it. You know, I didn't talk too much about the fact that I didn't get my start as a professional speaker. I got my start as a professional magician and worked magic professionally for 10 years. And I think it's the latter of the two that you mentioned. I think my time working in magic has really informed my time as a storyteller. When you're a magician, and whether you are a magician on stage or you've been to a magic show, and you see just the wonder and awe in the audience, when you see their mouths open and their eyes wide, and you just see the pure joy that brings as somebody on stage is directing their attention where they want it to go and making magic happen in front of them. That's something that you chase after in all areas of your life, that wonder and that awe. And I think that's what great storytellers do. That's what I try to do every time I take the stage and tell a story. Is get that same wide-eyed, mouth-open look from an audience that is hearing my story, not because I'm fooling them, not because I'm tricking them, but because they're seeing something on stage that is connecting with them on a deeper level. They're seeing an emotion that they've experienced. They're seeing a room that they have been in. They're seeing a life that they want to live or have lived. And I just think that emotional connection is the pure magic of good storytelling. And I think everyone has that in them. My biggest fear is that somebody would listen to this, Katerina, and say, that's great for you. You have an amazing story. That's great for you, Katerina. You've got a podcast and you're great at this. And you have to recognize that you and I have nothing that everybody listening to this don't have. We have an ordinary story of growing up. We have an ordinary story of having parents. We have an ordinary story of struggling sometimes and succeeding sometimes. And if you think your story is ordinary, if you think I don't have what it takes, I just want to be the first one to tell you that's exactly what it takes. I'm not looking for a 1 in a million story. I'm looking for a 1 in every household story, because the people who tell those stories are the people who are having the biggest impact on this world. A 1 in a million story, you know how many people that helps? 1 in a million.
Yeah. Wow.
1 in every household story, You know who that helps? Everybody.
Yes.
So go out there and tell your story. That's the magic. That's where it comes from. And that's what you can do and the impact that you can have on people's lives every single day.
I am immensely grateful to you for these invaluable insights, for sharing your magic with us, because there is undisputed magic there whenever we open our heart and invite other people in. There is inspiration there in itself. And it has been a true privilege and an honor to share this podcast episode with you in this conversation. And I do hope that you will return one day. And I hope that I will get a little better in presenting and telling my story, all inspired by you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Pat.